in the competition. I think
do.
we should give some applause for that.
Yeah.
The substance, please. It is premiering tonight. If you don't have a ticket, do not feel bad. It's a very hot ticket. There will be more screenings. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a bit, but this is a really ambitious, in the best way, strange film. And I wonder if you can just talk about what it means to you to come here for the first time with a film that's like that, that's so different and artistic and bold.
First of all, I feel extremely humbled. And in the film is a French director, an English production, and an American film. So it kind of encompasses, in a way, everything that the festival kind of represents. And in the world of waving a magic wand, there couldn't have been a better place for this to be premiering, of which I will be seeing it completed for the first time as well tonight. Wow. So I'm a little nervous. It's not always easy watching yourself, but it really seems easier on paper than sitting in the chair for 8 hours. But it's part of I think the fun of doing it is kind of exploring that different aspects of you. I mean, even and when you see, I hope you see the film, the transformation that takes place is really dramatic.
I can't wait.
It's not glamorous, I'll just warn you.
In the best way, I would bet. To zoom out a little bit, I've seen you say you didn't have a blueprint for your career necessarily. Can you talk a little bit about that, what you mean by that, and without one, how it's felt to navigate it and getting to a moment like this?
Well, I think if I really am being honest, it's just how I grew up. I would say I didn't have a blueprint, not just for my career, but for life. And so there was a lot that I was left to kind of figure out on my own. And, there's pluses and minuses with that. The gift of that is it gave me a great sense of independence and determination, and I didn't have a safety net to fall back on. And what it also did, though, is it propelled me forward because I had nothing to lose, because I had nothing. And on the downside is, it can give you certain levels of insecurity because you have no idea exactly how to go or which way to go. But in the end, I think it's one of those things for each of our lives. It's perfectly designed to get us exactly where we are in this present moment. And without all of that, I wouldn't be who I am.
So taking a movie like Ghost, for example, you'd been acting for a few years, you'd had successful films. This is a massive success, right? And you're imbuing it with this really grounded, vulnerable performance. How did you experience the noise around you and around that movie? And how do you experience it now? Because it remains such a touchstone.
What do you mean by noise?
Attention, fame, box office, just the sheer enormity of it.
In some ways, I don't know if you ever get used to it. It just becomes more familiar. And I think with anything, it's just it's all things that can pull you out of your center, and at the same time push you to become more aware of how do you stay in your center, how do you stay grounded. I have pilaf, and my family. It really helps you to keep a sense of what's really important. I mean, this is all wonderful, and the realization that what I do isn't who I am. It's just what I do. And that's where you get an ability to have that quieting of the noise that you talk about.
Yeah. How did you find from there navigating what I imagine was a lot of opportunity? I think you did A Few Good Men right after that, and it was such a different kind of role for you. You played that character with such authority and ferocity. Was that something you were looking for, to challenge yourself, challenge perceptions perhaps of what you did on screen?
I mean, I think I've always looked for roles that push me out of my own comfort zone, and also are thoughtful, and I had to go in and audition with a big belly, which I think Tom was feeling quite embarrassed.
Especially for the nature of that role, it's quite.
But it
quite,
worked.
Yes.
It worked.
Yeah, there you go. It clearly worked in the end. Yes. One other project in that period that I was so fascinated by that you worked on was If These Walls Could Talk, because you really were around the height of your fame and success, reaching this new peak, and this was an incredibly risky HBO project that really frankly explored women's experiences with abortion. You starred in it, you produced it. Did it feel like a risk to do something like that, and what made you feel committed to doing it?
Well, I think it was, one, the important difference is we wanted to frame it around unwanted pregnancy. And that is a very different thing than taking a side for abortion, being pro or against. It's what happens to women when we are faced. And by doing the project, it was something we got turned down by many studios, and this was the very early days of HBO. And I have to say, they were incredible partners that stepped up and really allowed us to kind of illustrate the challenges that were in play for women in the 50s, because at that time it was kind of set in one house with the idea of what would the walls say if they could speak, in the 50s, the 70s, and the 90s. And it didn't feel risky to me to do it. It felt important, and any risk that would have come from it would have been welcomed.
I think Max put it on for streaming a few years ago with the HBO, in part just given the sad, enduring reality of a movie like that.
100%, because when you look at some of the situations that occurred, particularly in my episode that took place in the 50s, with these backstreet abortions that left this woman bleeding to death. And it's something that is definitely a cautionary tale of where we don't want to find ourselves back by not supporting women's reproductive health.
Yeah.
I think they just re-released it just when everything went down with the Roe v. Wade being overturned.
Exactly. Yeah, it was very auspicious timing, unfortunately. So the whole idea of you producing that too is interesting to me, because as we know, in Hollywood, as actresses get older, especially back when you were rising, it can get a little bit more challenging to navigate. And you've talked about what happens when you turn 40. How did you navigate that?
I feel like all things, it's an ongoing process. And I think that it's been beautiful to see, because I think a lot of things have changed. And I think streaming has actually had a lot to do with that. I think we see a lot more content that is highlighting some incredible, talented women, like Feud, that I just did. How did I navigate it? I don't know. You just show up one day at a time. How do you navigate it? You just show up and you face what's in front of you to the best of your ability. And I think what's more important is how you hold yourself, not how the world is holding you. Because what we think is what we create. And if you buy into, which is exactly what the substance is about, it's about this male perspective of the idealized woman that we as women have bought into. Not what somebody's doing to us, but what we've bought into. And I think we are changing it right now. We are living the change right now.
It's a random example, but I even think of a movie like Charlie's Angels, the sequel, because that was kind of a badass thing to do, to play that kind of villain. You had a kind of iconic shot in that movie. But were those kinds of roles that did it feel to you like you were keeping it fresh for yourself, even just as maybe things around were?
I think if I look at something and it scares me a little bit, I usually know that maybe there's something in it. Because if I don't do things where I step out of my own comfort zone, then I can't grow. And, getting the call from McG saying, can you start the movie 3 weeks earlier? And hey, what do you think about being in a bikini? scared the shit out of me. It wasn't on my agenda. But there you go.
Yeah.
You just roll the dice.
You jump in. What scared you most about the substance?
The script was very unique, very complex, and it really required a real level of vulnerability, and a level of vulnerability in exposing oneself in a very raw sense. I said unglamorous, but it's really more in a raw sense, because it's addressing feelings of rejection and lack of place and belonging and things I think we all experience. But for me to be able to kind of step into that and really let those parts of myself be seen. So the whole thing. Let's just say the whole thing.
The whole thing. Is there?
But I had a great partner in it with working with Margaret Qualley.
Yes.
I mean, I literally couldn't have had a better castmate to kind of share in this journey.
Talk about an exciting new generation too to get to work with.
Love her.
Yeah. What in your career, if you look back, and I'm sure many things have scared you, but what role, if you really were like, God, that terrified me when you took it on?
Probably this one. Because it's a genre that's not as familiar for me. It's I don't know, probably this one, because it really, I had to, I don't know. We'll just leave it at that. I don't want to, but probably this one. And I think probably striptease in a different way. Mm-hmm. But they all have to have a little bit of that, like a little bit of that fear of, can I deliver? Can I,
Yeah.
And is it saying something that will make a difference?
With striptease, you did say something in, behind the scenes, even in the sense that it was a big breakthrough in terms of pay equity for women, you setting a record at the time. What was it about that moment and the importance of advocating for yourself? You mentioned coming into this industry with that independent streak, and I think that's a great example.
I think with striptease, what was interesting is on the outside, it's about, a woman who is, working as a stripper. But for me, it was about a woman who was trying to survive and be able to take care of her daughter in the best way she could. And that's what, to me, was like kind of the grounding element of it. And also the external judgments that we place on certain people for what they do. Mm-hmm. And that life isn't black and white, that there's a lot of gray.
You also spoke about it a little bit in your memoir, which, if people have not read it, is truly one of the great actor memoirs I've read, and is
Thank you.
Incredibly vulnerable and honest. And I think you've developed a kind of reputation for being honest in this industry. With that memoir as an example, but even more broadly, how have you found being that open, talking about the harder parts of your life publicly, of this industry, and having that forward for you?
Well, when the idea of the book came, there's a lot of ways you could promote yourself, and doing a book is, for me, there's a lot of easier ways. And I thought, if I'm going to share a portion of my life, then it really needs to be on a very human level, because otherwise, what's the point? And I think that, I talk about being scared. I was terrified. Terrified that it wouldn't be interesting, that I wouldn't have anything to say. And then I realized if my story, if there was one person that it might help or relate to, then it would have been worth it. And, I had an unusual childhood that, and my essential question in the book was, how did I get here? Because on paper, it doesn't make sense. And to have lived the life that I've lived, to have done all the things. I have no education. I have no background. I was on my own at 16. There's none of it that makes any sense at all. And so that exploration of really looking at where I've come from also gave me, it was not only cathartic, but it gave me deeper insight and appreciation of all the people, including my parents, who, were definitely less than nurturing at crucial times. And I really see them in a way today that I hold them with a lot of gratitude for being who they were and giving me and seeing them with humanity.
Do you come out of an experience like that, of writing that, of releasing into the world, not with a different attitude necessarily, but I've certainly noticed in the last 5 years or so, you've done some of the most exciting, dynamic, unexpected work of your career. I don't know if that's a coincidence. Do you think it is?
I took a long break, right? I didn't work for about 6 years, and I just stayed home with my kids. And, there were moments when, going back to your question, at 40, where I didn't look 20 and I wasn't 30, but I wasn't what they thought of as 40. And I don't know if they quite knew what to do with me. And work wasn't really as dynamic. And I think I hit a point where I thought, is this something I want to do anymore? And then I felt like, well, maybe there's a song I haven't finished. And so let me see. And so it was really about just re-engaging my own energy to see if this was something. I think I didn't even know if I was good at it. I really questioned all of that. And so I thought, well, I won't know until I'm willing to take the risk and see where I'm at.
The one interesting element of that is television, because you really hadn't done it. You hadn't done a series, which I think had a lot to do with the way the business worked. And I think Empire was the first show you were on for more than one episode.
Which I did only because my daughter was on the show, and I thought she's working in Chicago, and I could have time with her. And then we ended up not even having any scenes. Right. So, but yes.
Fun role though, fun show. How did you experience it?
It was definitely very unfamiliar, right. A different way of working. And I can't say I was extremely comfortable always, but definitely very eye-opening to a whole different medium. And very different even, let's say, from Feud or Landman, which I just wrapped, because they're a different type of television, because I'm now getting a taste of exploring all the different aspects.
Were you attracted to television before that in your career? Like, obviously, we're going to talk about Feud, which is so fantastic, and I'm so excited for Landman. But before that, was it something that was on your radar, or was it just really as the business changed? I
think, I don't know if I would characterize it as being on or off my radar. I think it's more just as things evolved and interesting projects were being created. So I think, I love that the lines of separation have now blurred. Mm-hmm. And so it's I think opened up the possibilities of there being even more to do and in different ways. I love the long form, because for me it's like reading a novel when you have a show that you can watch, and as an actor, the ability to also explore a character in greater depth is something that I'm really looking forward to.
So with Feud, to what we were talking about earlier, you have actresses of your generation, like Diane Lane, there's Molly Ringwald, actresses who were in these... To
see a project that had women that were my peers playing women that were their age and that weren't just mothers or wives. And but it was really a really exciting dynamic and group to be around. Even I can't say more. What can I say?
How did it come your way? How did it develop for you?
Well, Ryan Murphy and I'll do it.
And then...
So I just jumped in.
Wow. And you did a lot of research on this character. On Anne.
Well, it's important. I think if you're playing a real person, you have a responsibility not just to the person, but to their family. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to honor that. I wanted to honor her family, and as much of the story. For those who don't know, this is a woman who was accused of murdering her husband, and the question of whether it was an accident or premeditated. And within my research, she did not kill him. It was an accident.
Contrary to the way Truman Capote depicted
yes,
it.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And let me add also for a few, because Tom Hollander is a revelation. What
He's
a joy.
incredible.
Most of my scenes were with Tom, and that was incredible. Also, there's a scene where Tom and I are sitting on a couch, and we are watching Jessica Lange, and I felt like I was in a master class.
Yeah.
Literally watching her work was remarkable. We're getting further and further away from allowing ourselves to make mistakes, and we don't grow or learn from our wins. We grow and learn from our mistakes. And we need to, I think, as humanity, we need to start exercising a little bit more compassion for ourselves and for each other. Give a little bit more room. I think, we all fall down at some point, and it's how we choose to pick ourselves up. And I think we need to be less judgmental and less closed, and reaching a little bit more to help each other up.